everyone, and welcome to my channel. This is Amanda, and I'm so happy to have you here because this is my very first video, so if you're watching, thank you very much. So it's kind of funny just jumping in like this, but for my first video, I decided to wrap up the 6 books I read in July. So the first book I read is The Ancestor by Danielle Trussoni. This book came out in spring 2020, and it was one of the books I was most excited about when it was about to come out. And I just love anything that's horror, and looking at the cover, I mean, look at that. That looks like a great horror film right there, or book as it were. So I got it last year, but for some reason I just didn't get around to reading it right away. But then going into July, last month, I wanted to read a few books that were set in Italy. I had a few that were on my TBR, and one of the books I kind of needed to bump up for a special reason, which I'll talk about in my next video because I'm not quite done with it yet. But anyway, I decided to read a few books that are set in Italy, and The Ancestor was the first one I picked. So the story is, this woman, Bert, which is short for Alberta, she gets a letter in the mail one day, and she finds out that she has inherited a mansion, or a castle actually. She's inherited a castle and a lot of money from a family she doesn't really know that lives in northern Italy. So she and her husband travel to Italy to look at the documents and sign the papers and kind of get a feel for what she's about to inherit. But through a series of events, it ends up that Bert ends up going to this castle alone without her husband. And it's a pretty isolated place. It's right there. It's on Mont Blanc, which is in the very northern border of Italy, right by France. And it's a really isolated place, especially in winter, which it is at this time. There's no way to access this castle except by helicopter. So she's in this castle with one surviving family member who wasn't able to inherit, and, well, there might be another family member there, with a couple of surviving family members who weren't able to inherit, as well as a few staff who help take care of the castle, because it's a pretty big place and it's hard to take care of that on your own. So at the very beginning, I loved this book. Right from the very first chapters, I thought it was really exciting, and I was ready for just like a scary, spooky, kind of mysterious story. I'm all about that. I mean, if you have castles in Europe, I'm in. If you have like inheritances from family that you never expected to get anything from, I'm in. But while I'm used to stories that involve like ghosts and, you know, things that are more supernatural and spooky in that way, this one actually takes a very different turn from what I was anticipating. I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is. I don't really want to spoil it for you, but it goes in a direction that's a little bit more, maybe kind of like science fiction in a certain way. And at first I was thrown off by this. It kind of really, it really surprised me, and it was very different from what I was expecting it to turn out to be. But the more I thought about it, I thought this actually really makes sense, because this book really plays homage to a lot of the classics of gothic literature. And if you look at gothic literature, including something like Frankenstein, you'll see that there are a lot of stories that kind of go in a more science fiction route with man-made monsters and evolution and genetics and things like that. So this story is a little bit more in line with that pillar of literature. And once that kind of clicked in my mind, I was able to accept it a little bit more and kind of get back into the story a little bit. It was a really interesting and thought-provoking novel, and while it is spooky in certain ways, I think it's also very like heartwarming in a certain way. It's all about family and protecting people, protecting those from others who would take issue with them. I think you can kind of draw some similarities between the themes of this book that emerge later on with some issues that you see nowadays with certain groups of people being marginalized and put in danger by people who don't understand them or hate them in certain ways. So in the end, I really like this book. So I gave it 4 stars, and all in all, I really did enjoy it, even if it was a little bit different from what I was hoping it would be. I would definitely recommend it. I mean, look at that cover. That cover, it's kind of stunning, so I think you should read it. The second book I read is called What the Hex by Alexis, Daria. It's actually a novella and an audiobook, and it's currently only available on Audible, for the time being at least. So I was really excited to read this because last year I read You Had Me at Ola, which was a romance that Alexis Daria wrote, and the first in her new series. The second book in that series comes out in September, and I'm really excited for that one. But I was pretty happy that kind of to make that wait a little bit easier, we got to have this little novella in the middle. So What the Hex is a paranormal romance. It follows Catalina, or Kat, who is a witch, and she grew up on this magical island, Isla Bruja, which is off the coast of Florida. And about 5 years ago, she left the island and hasn't gone back since. She doesn't seem to have her witch magic powers anymore, but she is going back because her older sister is getting married. But once she arrives on the island, she finds that pretty much everyone there seems to be in a trance of some sort, it's like they're under a spell. And she quickly figures out that someone has put a spell on the two families that are about to be united in matrimony, because they want to take all this power that they're going to have accumulated through the marriage. Kat needs to figure out a way to get her family out of this trance and save them before it's too late. She ends up getting help from her high school nemesis, Diego, who himself is the best man and the younger brother of the groom who's about to get married. While she considered him a nemesis before, because he kind of beat her to becoming valedictorian, she was only salutatorian, and that really upset her. And I can relate to that, but that's a story for another day. So while she considered him a nemesis at the time, now that they're a few years older, at least 5 years older, even more actually. But now that they're in their 20s, she's starting to get over that old, negative feelings about him being academically superior than her. And although they have a very important curse to undo, they also can't deny their very obvious attraction to each other. So on the one hand, this is a fun little mystery where they need to break the spell and free their families before they're doomed forever. But it's also a fun little romance too. While Kat and Diego work together to break this spell, they're also spending a lot of time together. There's like the trope of the only one bed situation, and they end up developing a relationship with each other. So I don't know, I just really enjoyed this book. I listened to it over the course of, I think, just 2 days. I would have done it faster, but I was kind of busy those 2 days. But I just really enjoyed it. It was fun. I loved the witchy puns that they had, like the title itself, What the Hex. That's not just a title, they say it in the book too. And I also love the amount of Spanish that was thrown in there. Now this might not work for everyone, but for me, Spanish is my second language. That I'm not fluent in Spanish, but I speak Spanish sufficiently, and so I always feel excited when I hear Spanish in a book and they don't translate it for you. I hate it when they translate really easy things. It's not necessary. But in this one, they just throw in some Spanish. They throw in a lot of Spanish, actually, and it just makes me feel proud of myself when I understand it. Like, oh, I understand what they just said there. No need to translate that for me. But even beyond those kind of superficial things I just said, I just really liked the story. I thought it was fun and it was cute, and I don't know, it was just a fun, quick read. And actually, I would be happy to read a full-length version of this. If this is ever adapted into a full novel, I would happily read it. So I gave this 4.5 stars. It was really fun, and I'm finding that I really like Alexis Daria, and I can't wait to read her next book, which comes out in September. So look for my review of A Lot Like Adios in a couple months. So the third book I read was The Star-Crossed Sisters of Tuscany by Lori Nelson Spielman. So I got this last November. I think it was November. I got this last November when it became a selection for Book of the Month. This book hadn't really been on my radar before that, but when it became a selection for Book of the Month, I don't know, I thought it looked like a really interesting and cute story. And I've actually heard amazing things about it since it came out by various people that have read it already. So I was really excited to finally get to this. So The Star-Crossed Sisters of Tuscany follows the Fontana family. They're an Italian family that now lives in New York City, and there's apparently a curse in the family where all second-born daughters are doomed to be loveless, never find love, never be married. Pretty much everyone in this family takes this curse very seriously. So the main character is Amelia. She's 29 years old, and she's been happily single for pretty much this entire time. She works as a baker in her family's business, and she Although she's a smart and kind and creative person, certain family members of hers really take advantage of her a lot, specifically her grandmother and her older sister. But she doesn't seem to really realize this, and she just kind of accepts her fate, and she puts on a happy face and is just content with living the single life. In contrast, her younger cousin, Lucy, who is also a second-born daughter, is going out of her way to try to find love. She's playing the field, dating lots of different guys, but none of those relationships ever work out. Now, enter their great aunt Poppy, which is the younger sister of Amelia's grandmother. So, of course, Poppy is herself a second-born daughter, cursed and doomed to live a life without love. She's about to turn 80, and she wants to take these two great nieces on a trip to Italy, their homeland, to break the curse. So already it's set up to be a really cute and fun and adventurous story. The novel takes these three characters to Venice, Florence, and then the Amalfi Coast. Now I'm just going to say a side note, I was really excited about the itinerary because 3 years ago, my husband and I took our honeymoon there, which by the way was 3 years late, so we've been married for 6 years. But anyway, 3 years ago we took our honeymoon in Italy, and we went to Venice, and then Florence, and then Milan. So the last city was different, but the first two were the same, and so I was kind of excited to relive that trip again vicariously through this book. And it was fun to relive those memories and feel like I was in Italy again. I definitely want to go back to Europe sometime very soon. So anyway, while they're in Venice, Amelia and Lucy are kind of skeptical and kind of grumpy. Lucy feels like she needs to go back to her home in New York because her grandmother and her sister are really angry at her for taking this trip, as if one little trip to Italy is like such a big deal, but apparently to them it is. And Lucy apparently just isn't interested in traveling to Europe, which I don't understand, but whatever. You do you, Lucy. Anyway, while they're in Venice, they find out a secret about Poppy that makes them a little bit more sympathetic. And they also start to learn about Poppy's story. So while these three women are going across Italy in 2019, October 2019, we're also getting little bits of Poppy's story back when she was younger, growing up in Tuscany, and how she fell in love with a German man, Eric, or as she calls him, Rico, and what kind of happened with their whirlwind romance that ended up having them separated, Poppy living in New York and being estranged from her family. So I really liked getting to know Poppy's story. I think Poppy's romance, which began back in 1959, is the true romance at the heart of this novel. But even so, our other two characters do also kind of come into themselves and find love along the way as well. By the time they get to Florence and then into the family home, which is in Trespiano, there are some turning points for each of the characters. And finally they get to the Amalfi Coast in Ravello, where everything is supposed to go down. I really, really loved this book, actually more than I expected to. I mean, I had high expectations, especially after seeing how much other people loved it, but even so, I think it actually exceeded those expectations. It was a really nice novel that I think what I like the most about it is how we see our characters kind of grow into themselves and become more self-assured and more true to who they are. Both Lucy and Amelia had a lot of growing to do, and just being less of what their family expects of them and wants them to be, and even pushes them to be. And in Amelia's case, I like that she eventually learned to stand up to the bullies in her family and stop letting them basically emotionally and verbally abuse her, which is kind of what it was, in my opinion. So I really love to see the self-growth in both of them. But beyond Amelia and Lucy, I also really loved Poppy as a character. I loved her romance when she was younger, but I also loved the person she was now that she was about to turn 80. She is a firecracker of a woman, especially for that age. And I just hope that I can be like her when I'm in my 70s and 80s and beyond. She's full of life, and she's full of wisdoms and little like one-liners that you want to write down. I really enjoyed her character. I thought she was fun and honestly a great influence on her two great nieces. All in all, I think The Star-Crossed Sisters of Tuscany was a very whimsical and cute, but also powerful and empowering novel, and I loved it. So I give it 5 stars, and I hope that everyone reads it. I think it's the kind of book I could recommend to pretty much everyone, from my mom and my aunt to people who are younger than me, like my younger sister. I just think it was a really great story, so I loved it. 5 stars for sure. The 4th book I read is The Woman in Red by Giovinazzo, and this is a book kind of like the Ancestor that I was really excited for when it came out last year. It came out in August 2020, and it was one of my most anticipated books. I ended up getting the book a few months after its release, or maybe more recently, I can't remember. I picked it up at some point recently, at some point in the last year, and I've just been waiting to read it. So like the other couple of books I mentioned that are set in Italy, this one also is partially set in Italy. It follows real-life historical figures who are revolutionaries in the 1840s. So it starts off with Anna, who later becomes known as Anita, and we follow her life from when she was a child, when she was very misunderstood and didn't really fit in with the social norms of the time. I would definitely call her an early feminist, honestly. But she was brave and strong-willed as a child. But when she's a teenager, she's forced into a marriage that she does not want, and eventually her husband leaves her. He sees that there's no love in this marriage, and so he goes south to fight in the war. At this point, this is when Anna meets a revolutionary who's originally from Italy. His name is Giuseppe Garibaldi. He goes by Jose here in Brazil. Did I mention that they're in Brazil? They're in Brazil. Anyway, he goes by Jose with all the locals, and she ends up meeting him, and they fall in love and have a whirlwind romance. And of course, this is very against what society thinks they should be doing. Anna is technically still married, although her husband, I mean, she hasn't seen him. He might be dead. We don't really know. And on top of that, even if she wasn't married already, her being in a relationship with Jose is very, very frowned upon because they're not married. This is, of course, in a time when women and men can't interact with each other unless they're married, basically. Or unless they at least have a chaperone with them. So anyway, they fall in love and they start living as a married couple, even though they're not actually married to each other. But they end up fighting alongside each other, first for Brazil's freedom, then for Uruguay's freedom, and eventually they make their way to Jose's original homeland, Italy, to fight for Italy's unification to become its own nation. So of course, I knew going into this that these two people were revolutionaries. For some reason, I was still surprised that there were several fighting scenes and battle scenes. I'm not really that into like action and wars and fighting scenes and battle scenes and all that. It's just not my cup of tea. So I don't know why I was surprised that it was here. It should have been obvious to me, but I was. But even though I don't really like battle scenes that much, I actually really liked it in this book. Part of why I liked it so much, I think, is because it was focused on Anita and how, although she was a woman and although she eventually became a mother, she was fearless and she would fight in the wars just like all the other men did. She would wield a sword, she'd fight on ships, she'd fight on horseback, it didn't matter. I just think that was really cool. I also really love how progressive she and Jose are. They're both very ahead of their time. For example, neither one of them really sees the point of marriage. They just see it as a piece of paper. But even without being married, they consider themselves husband and wife, and they live as such, and they have children together. And they don't really care what other people think of them. And I think that's kind of cool. Another thing is, as I alluded to, they aren't as caught up in gender roles as others would expect them to be. Anita fights alongside her husband, and she's very involved, even after she stops fighting in wars because she's, pregnant and being a mother. Even so, she's always very active in the political movements and in getting people rallied up and involved in the war. I just think it's really remarkable how big of a role she plays, whether directly and involved with it or kind of on the sides and helping out in different roles. I like how she's able to move into different roles, and she's pretty flexible with that, and she doesn't let her expectations and disappointment about not being involved in certain ways, she doesn't let that hold her back from really shining in different roles. And Jose himself, he's also a great character. He really loves Anita, he loves their children. He's just such a warm and good character. I really loved I really loved both of them. I really loved their relationship together in this book as well. Another thing I really enjoyed about this book, and part of why I was drawn to it in the first place, is how international it is. It starts off in Brazil, in the 1830s really. Then they go south a little bit to Uruguay, and they spend some time there. And it eventually ends in Italy, where we see like the final act of the story. So I just really like getting to know these characters, and I really enjoyed the settings in these different countries on 2 different continents. And it was kind of fascinating to learn about people from history that I had never heard about. I never knew about either of these historical figures, but I really enjoyed learning about it in this book. So I gave this book 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it, and I think it's a great book if you like historical fiction or anything a little bit political or romance. It checks a lot of boxes, so I definitely recommend it. The 5th book I read is We Are the Brennans by Tracey Lange. This is a debut novel, and it actually isn't published officially until the beginning of August, but I got it through Book of the Month. You can see from the little square here. I got it from Book of the Month, so that's why I was able to get an early copy, and I'm pretty happy about that because it was one of the books I was pretty excited for this year. We Are the Brennans is a contemporary fiction novel. It's set in 2017. It follows an Irish-American family, the Brennans, and the different, very real-life issues that they're facing. So it starts off when Sunday, which is the second of the adult siblings, she gets into a car crash because she was drunk driving, and she ends up going back home to New York. Now, she hasn't been back to see her family in New York since she left about 5 years prior to this. The reason why she left is a bit of a mystery, but there is definitely some drama surrounding whatever happened 5 years ago. So while we're kind of wondering what her backstory really is, we're also seeing different issues that are going on in the present day. So her older brother, Denny, he and his wife are going through a rough patch, and they might be headed for divorce. And simultaneously, Denny is also facing some significant financial issues, and he's kind of keeping it a secret from people he shouldn't be keeping it a secret from. One of those people is his business partner, Cale. Denny and Cale own a bar together that they started together a few years before this. Now, Cale is very involved with the Brennans. He grew up alongside them. He was friends with the family for a long time. He was also previously engaged to Sunday. He and Sunday had been in a relationship for a long time, and they had been engaged secretly, but still engaged, until she suddenly left him and went to California 5 years before this. Cale is kind of concerned about, what's going on with the bar and them opening a second location. He's also married and has a kid with this woman, Vivian, who is kind of a rebound, not gonna lie. But anyway, but he and Vivian, they're kind of not on the same page either, so their relationship is a little bit rocky as well. So there's a lot of moving parts in We Are the Brennans. There's a lot of different little stories that are going on, and it is kind of a drama, but the issues are very realistic and the kind of issues that people face in real life. I mean, they're issues that I've seen in real life among people that I know or, are acquaintances with. But for all the drama and kind of intense backstory that is in here, I actually really liked this novel. Something about it just felt really comfortable and cozy and warm to me. I don't really know how to explain it, but it just felt like a novel I could just get wrapped up in. Like, I don't know, sitting by the fire with a blanket on and a cup of tea next to me. That's the kind of book that I would want to read at that time. It was just really, it was gentle, but also really powerful and meaningful to me. I really loved the characters. I loved how you really get inside their minds, and it follows the point of view of 6 different characters, third person, but 6 different point of view characters. One interesting thing about the format of this book is that each chapter follows a different character. So let's say you're following Denny. At the end of his chapter, say Sunday would say something, that'd be the last quote of the chapter. The next chapter would begin with that same quote and then follow her point of view until her chapter end with, for example, Jackie saying something, and that would be the last quote of her chapter, and the next chapter would follow Jackie, starting with that quote. So I thought that was really interesting. It really served as a great way to volley between the different characters, and it made it very continuous. You feel like you're never missing anything. Even though you're following different characters, you're always getting someone's point of view throughout all of the action. I also love how it's kind of stream of conscious. Each of the characters, I mean, the story progresses in a chronological, linear way, but even so, for each of the characters that you follow, you kind of get in their mind and you kind of fall back into their memories, and it's very fluid and it's very stream of conscious, but not in a way that's confusing or wishy-washy or whatever. But I just really like that aspect of the book as well. It made me feel like I was more inside the characters' minds, and I really enjoyed that. So I really love this book. I actually read it because a book group that I'm in chose it as a book club discussion, and I haven't really participated in most of them, but I wanted to read this one. So because it was selected as this month's book club pick, I decided to bump it up on my list and read it right away. And I'm really glad I did, because I just really enjoyed this book. It was kind of just exactly what I needed to read right now. Also, I love that they're Irish American, because I have a fair bit of Irish in me, and my sister lives in Ireland, so I thought that was really cool too. So all in all, I love this book. I actually kind of flew through it faster than I expected to. I finished a week before I was supposed to, but I just really loved it. So I give We Are the Brennans 5 stars. I love this book. The last book I read this month is The Devil and the Heiress by Harper St. George. So I was really excited for this book. Earlier this year, I read Harper's previous book, which is The Heiress Gets a Duke. This one was the first in her Gilded Age Heiresses series, historical romance series, and I got it from Book of the Month. The reason I got this one is because Evie Dunmore had recommended it, and I love Evie Dunmore's books, Bringing Down the Duke and A Rogue of One's Own. Her third one comes out next month, so I'm excited for that too. But anyway, because she recommended it, I thought, well, of course, I trust her recommendation and I have to read this one, and I really enjoyed this one. So when The Devil and the Heiress came out at the end of June, I was really excited. I was hoping it'd be a Book of the Month pick, but unfortunately it was not, so I got this cute little tiny paperback. But I'm so glad I got it, because I actually adored this book. I actually loved it more than the first book in the series, which I wasn't expecting to do, by the way. So in the first book, we're introduced to the Crenshaws, which is an American family. They're new money. They built their fortune in the railroad and iron industries. And the Crenshaw family has gone over to England, and the two parents are aiming to marry off their two daughters. They also have a son, but he's back in New York, managing the company. So in the first book, we see the older daughter, August, and her relationship with the Duke, Evan. And in the book, we also get to know some side characters, including August's younger sister, Violet, and Evan's best friend, Christian. Those two are the lead characters in The Devil and the Heiress. So in The Devil and the Heiress, Violet is about to be forced into a marriage that she doesn't want to a smarmy guy. She does not want to marry this guy, and she has some serious and valid reservations about this guy, but her parents are going to force her into marriage anyway. Meanwhile, Christian, who is the Lord of Lee, he has already asked her father for Violet's hand in marriage, but Mr. Crenshaw rejected him, and Christian hates to see Violet forced into a marriage with a bad man, which is Lord Ware, and he also still, really wants her. So he's decided to take matters into his own hands and find a different way to win her in the end, so to speak. For her part, Violet, she's refusing to this marriage, and she's decided that the best way to do that is to run away. She does tell Christian of this plan, and so he decides to help her. Through some kind of sneaky acts on Christian's part, Christian ends up helping Violet run away. So this kind of turns into a fun little road trip for the two of them. They take Christian's private carriage up north. Violet is on her way north to a home that she has access to, whereas Christian says that he's going to Scotland, where he also has property. Violet and Christian get to know each other pretty well during their travels. They're already kind of friends, but they're definitely getting to know each other more, and they're developing stronger feelings for each other. Violet is also an aspiring novelist, and she's currently writing a novel that's heavily inspired by the people in her life. Her novel kind of stars a character just like herself, and a character that's a lot like Christian. And so she's often paying attention to, how he looks, the way he talks, different things about him, and she's kind of squirreling that information away to add to her novel. In her novel, she calls him Lord Lucifer, which is hilarious. So a lot of Violet's decisions kind of come from this place of doing research for her book. she justifies certain actions in that way, not necessarily acknowledging or recognizing that she's actually just really interested in him and is developing a very strong crush on him. Christian is also developing feelings for Violet, but he's the kind of person that assumes that he can't love or he can't be loved. He doesn't think he's a good person, and so he kind of brushes that off as, just infatuation, nothing more serious than that. But then a big event happened during their travels, and it involves danger and rescue and nursing someone back to health. And they end up spending a lot of time in this home where this doctor has taken them in. And it's during this time that their relationship really starts to blossom, and they start to really fall in love with each other. But of course, Christian has been pretty deviant, and he has definitely kept a lot of information from Violet, and we know that it's just a matter of time before it all comes out. Unlike in the other book where the third act drama felt a little bit unnecessary, in this one, I saw it coming miles away. I was just waiting for it to happen. I knew it was just a matter of time. So I don't know what it is. I just really, really, really love this book. I loved it more than the first book, and I don't know, I've gotten to the point where I just want to like live in the lives of these characters. I'm probably gonna open my Sims game and make the characters in the Sims and just play out their lives there, which is dorky, and I don't really play Sims that much anymore. But I mean, I wanted a visual representation of the characters, and my artistic skills are severely limited, as in I can't draw basically at all. So I figured I'd do something a little bit easier and make some characters, which is funny, but whatever. So in the end, I really, really loved The Devil and the Heiress. I gave it 5 stars. It's a kind of book I'll probably go back and reread several times. I don't know, I think it's going to become like one of my fun little comfort books. And I can't wait to read the next book in the series. The next 2 books are already planned out. The next one is called The Lady Tempson Heir. It's going to follow the eldest of the Crenshaw siblings, Max, and the young widow, Lady Helena. And then the 4th book is going to follow Camille and Jacob Thorne. Jacob is the half-brother of Christian. So I'm really excited for the next 2 books in the series, but for now, this one has captured my heart and I loved it. So that wraps up my July. I read 6 books. I thought I was going to read a little bit more this month, but the month got busy for me, so I wasn't reading as much or as quickly as I would have liked to. But I have a couple books already in process, so I'll be finishing those early in August. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it a like and comment and subscribe and ring the bell and all that great stuff. If you read any of the books, please let me know. I'd love to hear what you thought about the books. Please leave your comments and tell me if you loved them as much as I did, or if you didn't like them as much as I did. Whatever it is, I want to know. And I hope I'll see you in the next video. This is my first one, so thank you again for jumping on for this brand new channel. But I'll be making a lot more videos in the future, so I hope to see you there. Thank you!